You're listening to the podcast Coffee with Mike and Julie, Libertarians Talk Psychology. This is current commentary from an MBA businessman and a PhD psychologist.
Look what they done to my song, Ma.
And I want to start it with a favorite story between you and me where we played pretend with our grandkids. Mm-hmm. And that was playing pretend with your grandkids is a completely natural and healthy thing. So here's the story. A few years ago now, you and I were on the back porch of the beach house with our son's family. His two kids were playing pretend with us, and it evolved. The game of pretend evolves because different participants change the game as you go along, and you just keep playing pretend.
I don't know how it came up, but you came up with Hook, the Captain Hook.
Somehow I came up with Captain Hook. So I had my Captain Hook. In my case, in our pretend case, I had my clenched fist with one finger up in the form of a hook. And the way Captain Hook would do his evil deeds was Captain Hook would spear one of the kids with that finger hook.
Finger hook.
And
he was the villain of the story.
Captain Hook was the villain, and the kids would squeal and laugh. So we kept playing the game, and
everybody got into it a lot. We really started we'd had a glass of wine, and we were having a good time, and the kids were having a good time because there was something about it that was kind of taboo, I think.
Well, she was trying to correct the problem of Captain Hook.
Yeah.
And so she would negotiate with Captain Hook to quit
being a
bad boy.
Well, didn't they put you in jail too?
I don't remember.
I can't remember, but the authorities were trying to control the villain in the story. Okay.
That's right. So Captain Hook, I would swear or a promise, okay, I won't do that anymore. So we'd start getting into whatever the game was, and as soon as the opportunity was right, I would hook one of the kids.
And violate your parole.
And violate my promise. And she started getting more and more angry at Captain
frustrated.
Hook. She was frustrated to the point.
But everybody having a really good time.
Well, but let's face it, the two kids started getting disturbed and irritated that Captain Hook was breaking his word. And it went far enough that our son and daughter-in-law interjected
and cocked an eyebrow at us like,
yeah,
what's going on here? We don't know if we like this.
He actually came in and interrupted the game and was kind of cautioning us on.
They tried to break it up.
They sort of did, but you and I, we were having such a good time, we kind of shrugged it off, and our son went ahead and tolerated it. And we kept playing the game, and the kids were getting more and more upset, and Captain Hook was...
Well, they were getting more... I don't think they were upset. I think they were getting more into the game, and they were. It was escalating.
Okay.
The involvement was going really high.
But what was great is one of them had a hat on, or a pirate hat or something, but the other one had a plastic sword.
Yeah.
So I'm brandishing my hook. And out of frustration, after about the fifth or sixth time of Captain Hook breaking his word, she comes up to me, grabs my wrist, and takes that plastic sword and cuts off the hook.
She resorts to violence.
It's
like she gives up her ethical standards and resorts to violence.
That's right. So, and of course,
which is out of character totally.
And we thought it was hilarious, but she addressed the problem. But the playing pretend was natural, healthy, fun. Okay, so I want to play
So human beings naturally do a phenomena called kind of go along and pretend.
Right.
It's a natural trait of ours to be able to use fantasy to fill in the psychological gaps in things. Okay.
Right. So this is from episode 732 of Part of the Problem. It's Dave Smith and Robbie the Fire Bernstein talking about this.
The officials are telling the American people and what the American people are seeing with their own eyes. And it's not like the corporate press got more dishonest. I mean, they've always been dishonest. It's just that it's more right in front of your nose. And that's what's so bizarre about all of it. So, they would say like the corporate press and the Bush administration after 9/11, they were saying things like Iran was in on 9/11. Now, if you know anything, you'd be like, really? You think the Shiites in Iran were working with the radical Sunni, like bin Ladenites? This obviously is not happening. They hate each other. They're like literally would kill each other in a second. But most people don't know anything about that, and most Americans just look at that and they go, yeah, crazy Muslims working with other crazy Muslims. Like, that seems plausible to me, So it's not like right in front of your nose. It's like, oh, these guys over there are bad guys, and so they're all working together. That's how it's somewhat easy to sell to the average American. But this is just so much different. It's really something. It feels like something out of the Soviet Union. Which at least like from what I've read about it would be that people like from the accounts, the firsthand accounts of people who lived under the Soviet Union, they'd basically say everyone knew what the government was telling them was bullshit. Even like apolitical people who just didn't really care. They're like, yeah, no, obviously we don't trust a goddamn word that's coming out of this, propaganda machine. But, you don't really say it publicly because, it's the Soviet Union and you could get in a lot of trouble. So you're just kind of like, yeah, oh yeah, sure, we totally believe you, and go on about your day. But to watch, like you can watch the news, watch a Joe Biden press conference, watch a Dr. Fauci interview, and they're like, we are considering in some areas, allowing people to take their masks off outside. If they're still socially distant and they've been vaccinated, then we can think about letting you breathe in fresh air outside. And then you just like open your window and look around and you're like, people have had their masks off outside for months. Now, this is a little bit different depending on where you live, but there's still, large parts of the country where this is the reality. You're hearing the officials say one thing, and it's as if it's completely removed from reality.
Okay, and that was at about the 28-minute mark of episode 732, Part of the Problem. So I'm going to continue the discussion. Our government's lies have become so obvious that we are now playing pretend. Mm-hmm. And the difference between playing pretend with our grandchildren and playing pretend with our government is this game of playing pretend with the government is not natural and it's deadly.
Well, I agree with that. I'm reminded of the children's fairy tale of the Emperor's New Clothes, where everyone participates in kind of a mass delusion or hallucination. The danger in that psychologically is that at some point we human beings believe our own pretend. So maybe that's what you're talking about, is that becomes really dangerous. It's dangerous from lots of angles. But at some point, there's something called the false memory syndrome in psychology. At some point in time, our fantasies feel as though they're real.
Do you think that's what goes on here?
Well, it can go on. I think when you say it's dangerous, I think it's dangerous from several different directions. The pretend reality is dangerous from all kinds of directions. Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to point out where I thought it first started becoming in your face, play pretend.
The government.
Something the government was telling us.
Uh-huh.
The first one I can think of was Benghazi. When the Obama administration...
Well, that's a big one. That is like a big, we're lying right to your face.
They talked about this filmmaker. No one had ever heard of this filmmaker. No one had seen it. When you see when the honest news media was reporting the views on this from this filmmaker, who supposedly this film started the whole Benghazi.
It didn't make any sense.
Battle.
The story did not make sense.
It just was not true, and they were putting this guy in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible.
It wasn't pretend for him.
Yeah.
They put that guy in jail for making a film.
But that's the first time in my memory where there were plenty of times where the government lied to us, as Dave Smith said. But that was the first time that it was such an obvious lie that everybody had to see that this is just bonkers.
And that's a very important point, because that's the first time, I'm not sure that's the first time, but that dawned on me that we put an artist in jail for free speech. And when you start putting your artists and your comedians in jail and you cancel them for free speech, then you got some serious censorship of people's attempt to understand their reality.
And going back to play pretend,
with the kids?
Play pretend in the government.
In the government.
Benghazi, I mean, they pretty much proceeded with that. I mean, continued to insist it was true.
I'm not sure they ever straightened that out. I mean, there are documentaries now on the crazy decisions made and the ridiculousness, but I think if you go back, I mean, for a lot of people, that was the reason I was unwilling to vote for Hillary Clinton. The reason is letting boys get killed on the top of that rooftop, and fight that fight without any support. That to me, and I don't know if I'm right, but to me what it looked like is Clinton failed to call out the military because it was politically incorrect. It was politically a bad thing.
Inconvenient, yeah.
And so to me, and I could be wrong, but people died because of political goals.
Yeah. And
that's like that's disgusting.
The thing, this thing about, some examples of playing pretend, the Black Lives Matter riots of last summer versus the Capitol protest, where we're still pursuing those people in the Capitol protests and trying to throw them in jail. So we're
not pursuing anybody from the Black Lives Matter riots. Are you sure?
No.
So
I'm relatively sure.
So they're just like
that's okay. And of course, we talked about this, the hilarious clip of the newscaster with a
what a great clip.
A car in flames in the background. And
I think it was trash cans or something. But anyway, there was a big.
Oh no,
it was
not
a car.
The one I'm thinking of. It was a car.
It was a car. Okay, maybe there was two.
And the newscaster is saying these are mostly peaceful protests.
It's just like, I wonder if he is to the point of regretting that. Is like he's saying mostly peaceful protests, and there's a big fire happening in the back of him. It's like.
Were mostly peaceful, but damage from looting and arson will cost $1 to $2 billion in claims. That's according to the Insurance Information Institute, and that would eclipse the previous high, the 1992 riots that followed the acquittal of 4 officers in the beating of Rodney King.
So then contrast that. So we played pretend. We played pretend that wasn't that big a deal, and it set records for dollars of damage and deaths, but we played pretend that was okay. And by the way,
the news media, I'm not sure I totally agree that we're playing pretend. Now here's the point I want to add to what you're saying. The news media is definitely they're playing like nothing to see here. We're going to craft this narrative for you, and you're going to eat this like a baby pablum. Don't question what we're telling you, just accept it. Okay, and there's a group of us that don't accept anything they tell us now. I mean, but it's not the whole country. There is a group that accepts that. I mean, it's at least 30% accepts that hook, line, and sinker. Well,
my point is we haven't reached a critical mass of the population who are refusing to accept this.
Well, I wish I knew.
As a country, I think we are still playing pretend. I don't care if 30% of us are not playing pretend. As a country, we're playing pretend.
Well, you have
Fox News goes in the direction that they seem to be pretty truthful, and then at some point they decided, well, we're going to start playing pretend
all of a
too.
sudden.
I mean, overnight.
Yeah.
And we had to find another source of our news.
Yeah. I think my question, and I don't think you and I have a good answer, but I was kind of thinking about how would I find out this answer, is what percent of us are quiet and we don't buy any of it. Okay, so because in your clip with Dave Smith, he points this out, and anyone that's read Google Archipelago knows how dangerous it is to be in the 49% that is like, this is bullshit. I'm going to say this is bullshit. I mean, it's a really interesting group dynamic, because without leaders willing to die for the cause, the herd, the followers, are not going to stand up to it. So this is why you're right when you say it's very, very dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. We are in a dangerous time.
So your point about people who speak up and say there's something wrong here, that makes me think of the Capitol protests. I mean, those people were going back to the quote,
nonviolent protesters.
Yeah,
I mean, they did break some windows, apparently.
A mostly peaceful protest. That's what that was.
No weapons, no fires were set, no bombs went off. Somebody put his boots up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, and
someone was saying people were farting on her desk.
That's like male humor. Sneaks into our podcast no matter what I try to do. Who cares if someone, how can that be proven? It's like somebody, but he did arrogantly, whoever that guy was, arrogantly prop his boots, big old, look like work boots. So the picture is hilarious. Just like, I'm gonna sit here at this desk, and somebody took her cell phone. They did steal, a worthwhile item.
But here they are, no mask, no disguise, except for the guy that's wearing the horned helmet. He's the only mask.
Yeah, and these people, apparently nobody has any records, although apparently, and see, I don't know how much of this is accurate. It's just, I don't know what to believe anymore of what I read. I take it all like, I don't know if this is true or not, but this Black Lives Matter advocate was in there stirring up trouble. He had a record. But the honkies, they had no records. They were just like, I guess, just Trump supporters.
But we're talking about playing pretend. We still have troops that are guarding the Capitol over that event. That was such a...
Well, that is an interesting phenomenon too. And I was thinking about this the other day, about how aggressive the left is. The left is, to me, I'm just beginning to come to this kind of thought that they project their aggression. They suppress. To me, the left suppresses its aggression so that it has to come out in psychologically convoluted ways. And then the right, they're just aggressive. I mean, the right just they don't suppress their aggression. Like Donald Trump, he didn't suppress his aggression. But you didn't see his aggression coming out in a convoluted way. So I see these behaviors like them staunchly guarding the Capitol to protect it from these rednecks that believe the country is being overtaken by Marxists. That is a projection. It's like they didn't even that group didn't even have any weapons.
Yeah,
they didn't have any guns. I mean, what were they going to take over? But anyway, it's fascinating.
I want to extend this concept to the Trump presidency, where we had an outsider become president, and this guy,
total outsider.
This guy was guilty of exaggerating numbers, just like you would expect a contractor entrepreneur to do,
Or a politician.
or a politician. But he would speak the truth when it came to playing pretend. I mean, he would expose the news media for fake news, and expose other politicians for their fake comments. And he was so good at it that the news media had to cover what he said, even when they were completely angry about what he was saying. They didn't figure out how to handle Trump until toward the very end. They started censoring. That's right. They started censoring him.
Well,
he started censoring everybody else. You know, for 3 or 4 years, they would say something, and then they were exposed to people saying, "Well, that's fake news." Well, they got to where they wouldn't address it anymore. They just censored people that.
Well, he's like the child that points out that the emperor has no clothes.
That's right.
And then I don't think the left ever understood his appeal to the right. His appeal to the right is the guy is fearless and said it and didn't play the game. And he took it on the chin. I mean, he, in a way, if the election was fraudulent, which I think we don't know right now, but then he took it on the chin all through this thing, you know, with that Russia hoax and all that. So that is a fascinating phenomena in American history, that this country produced a disruptor president, that we produced that he didn't elect himself. I keep telling my friends, I guess my so-called friends, and that they go, "I hate Trump, he's disgusting, he's filthy, he's vulgar, he's brash." I'll think, yeah, and
those are the so
what?
Give me some of the bad parts.
And so what? And by the way, you know, when you look at his accomplishments, holy mackerel, he accomplished stuff. He accomplished a lot. And very, very capable, because he was dealing with all this political backlash. But
he had plenty of flaws. Of course, I was entertained by the guy. I thought he was completely entertaining.
What I appreciate is his lack of willingness to play the political pretend game. And I think that's why he was elected, as that people saw him as someone who just wasn't going to play the emperor has no clothes game. He was going to expose stuff. And that's exactly what he did. And he got blowback the whole time. It was constant flow of blowback.
And here this guy is impeached twice. Impeached twice, and in the first case, it was over the Russia collusion, which...
Before it was investigated.
Which was completely hilarious. That it was hilarious when
Talk about a pretend game.
Yeah.
I mean, we taxpayers pay millions and millions of dollars for the Congress to play pretend. Let's all pretend that Trump has colluded with Putin. Let's all pretend that. And then they get a guy who should be retired, who has dementia, to not lead a task force, and then come up with nothing.
That's a good point, Mueller. We played pretend for a couple of years before we finally got to see Mueller on
like,
national television, and the guy was brain dead.
Well, I mean, try to be, kind to a guy. Now, here's the thing. It's okay with me for a guy to have gotten sort of senile.
Sure, it's okay.
But what's not okay is for him to be leading a task force, so-called leading.
And I blame him too. He knew that he was handicapped. He should not have accepted that job.
There you go. I agree. In other words, he should have understood his limitations.
Now, the people who were behind him, propping him up, like Weekend at Bernie's, they're guilty too.
Yeah.
But it wasn't obvious until they finally had to put him in front of national television.
Yeah. All I had to see, I did download that report, and it's just full of irrelevant bullshit stuff.
But my point is that that was playing pretend over, and the whole thing started over Trump saying on national television, maybe the Russians
Maybe
can
we should
look at
go
her
get
emails.
those emails from the Russians.
And really, Hillary Clinton's one that should have been thrown in jail or whatever for erasing her emails. But anyway,
Yeah.
so that was impeachment number one. Impeachment number two was where he comments to the other leader of another country,
Ukraine.
You need to look into this. You need to look into this
You need
Hunter
to
Biden
investigate
thing.
this stuff going on.
And he got impeached over that, and we continued to discover how Hunter Biden is doing all kinds of unethical, at best,
Well, the
unethical
other side,
stuff, making millions of dollars with leaders and corporate people from foreign countries.
The other side they're using real persuasion techniques. They use a dramatic framing of the problem. You know, they know that by a certain time, 2 months, 6 months, the American people will only remember the original frame.
Right.
And it's just like Dave Smith says, you know, most people are like, I don't remember that. And especially the left. The left is feeling oriented. They remember the feeling that is triggered by the problem frame. Like, Trump is bad. Trump is a backstabbing, bullshitter, all bullshit artist. He's so vulgar, and they remember the feeling, and they don't apply their slow think to the problem. Of course, it's not all their fault, because the news media, the so-called journalists of the country, which there are none left, do not educate the public because there's no money in it. So your point is well taken.
Well, and just to go back to what you were saying about how the problem gets framed and how it gets imprinted on people's minds. Mm-hmm. What do you call that? The framing or the? Well,
it's framing. It's confirmation bias when you think about if you frame the problem, then that's the problem. There's a frame around it. Nothing else is the problem.
And if you keep repeating it, it just reinforces
that's the persuasion technique of just say it over and over and over. Geez, they really buy into that. And then the fact that no information that contradicts it is allowed in, that's confirmation bias. I mean, there are all kinds of cognitive biases that apply, and they use all this stuff. The propaganda media. And I no longer want to call it the news media, because it's not the news media.
Yeah.
It's the propaganda media.
Yeah.
They're heavy into it.
So so my point about today's topic is, what a game of pretend we're playing as a society. And this is relatively new.
We think.
I think my perception is that it's relatively new to spout information that everybody on the face of it knows is not true, and a critical mass of our population goes along with it. You know, the COVID stuff is just an example.
Yeah, the COVID increases the power and control of government, and increases the passivity and the compliance, of the followers.
Yeah.
But that doesn't bother me as much as this political pretend, because to me the scientific pretend going on is just like stupid, but not crucial. The other stuff, just like Dave Smith said, the other stuff reminds me of what I'm reading and what I've read in Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah.
And the only, like Jordan Peterson says, the roots of that go all the way to hell.
Yeah.
That's the shadow. And what we had one of our Uncle Mike said, what about totalitarianism and self-deception? So when power and self-deception connect, that's what you get. You get the roots of the shadow. I love this phrase from Jordan Peterson. He's quoting Jung. The shadow in the psyche, the roots. I think this is right. I may have this wrong, but anyway, if I have it wrong, then I'm making up a new idea, which will be lucky for me. But the roots of the shadow go all the way to hell. Mm-hmm. There is no bottom to how bad human beings can be. we can be as
Oh,
bad
yeah.
as there is. That we can be as evil can be.
This television show I saw about World War II, they showed the Nazi concentration camps. But what's interesting to me about that is that we know the Russians and the Chinese did dastardly stuff too, but we don't have news media footage of whatever it was they did.
Yeah.
But we do have it of the Germans, and that was so evil, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and every one of us have the roots of that evil.
There you go.
And when we lose our process, our group process for enlightenment, that's the direction we go. We go straight to hell.
There you go.
And this country is showing signs
Oh yeah.
of.
And in fact, I'd like to conclude by kind of saying that, is that just whose fault is this? Is this our news media not being journalists anymore? Is this our leaders not having courage anymore? And I'm saying no. It's neither. Those two things are a problem, but they are not the problem. I say our population, we are the problem. We are going along with these people, and we are continuing to feather the nest of the news organizations so that they are not honest, and we are continuing to elect politicians who are blatantly one side or the other and not libertarians or not reasonable people, and our population needs to wake up.
Well, I totally agree with that. I think it's a multifaceted problem, but I agree with that. Everybody needs to wake up.